Blog Talk Radio.
This is the 20th of August 2013 edition of the News in 10. Or I assume we should say the news and when we get the news done. Normally from 10 to 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, but we'll be a little brief today. Today was a travel day for us. We'll start the news off with some information from the BBC here on an Egyptian court. We talked about this, I believe, yesterday. The ex-president, Mohammed Mubarak, he was, of course, ousted by the military also, and now, of course, we have Mohammed Morsi. Nonetheless, an Egyptian court is due to review a petition for release of President Hosni Mubarak. Mubarak's facing a retrial for complicity in the deaths of protesters during the 2011 uprising that ended in his removal. Now, this is basically the same platter of charges, if you will, that they have, or they are preparing for Mohammed Morsi. So it's very difficult to say where all this is going, but given his age in the 80s, we'll see. Another development is reported the Egyptian Coptic Church. The Coptics are the Christians, about 10% of Egypt's population. So that'd be roughly about 10 million. Well, I'll have to check it and see what the Egyptian population is. Anyway, nonetheless, a website had been hacked by, they claim, Morsi supporters. Very difficult to say who hacked the site. There's many hands there. Mubarak, incidentally, is 85 years old, so that has a lot to do with his entire situation, given that he has been imprisoned for a number of months, actually, about two, let's see. Well, he's been in prison about 3 years, 2011. And he's also, let's see, claims that the former president received gifts from a state-run publisher and so forth and so on. Gifts, properties that he owned, not unusual in a military-run type state as Egypt. The current military leaders, no doubt, will also have various villas and things. The military itself has enterprises throughout the country that are secret. They're not disclosed to the people, so people have absolutely no idea at all as to where they are going. The BBC reiterates that the U.S. canceled some very minor military exercises. I heard someone talking today, well, the 1.5 billion, 1.3 billion aid to the military, that's about 330 million pounds, would just be made up by Saudi Arabia and some of those. They've already given $15 billion, so it's kind of a drop in the bucket. Basically what the Egyptian military is looking to get is armaments, that sort of thing, access to very sophisticated training, and that will continue, obviously, to be the case. And we'll go back to the BBC if things cooperate with us here. And number 10's involvement with the stoppage of Mr. Miranda. Miranda is from Brazil. He is the partner of Mr. Greenwald. Number 10 was involved in discussions with the Guardian about materials it obtained from. This is an Edward Snowden story. The Tory Prime Minister there, Cameron, ordered Britain's top civil service, Jeremy Hayward, to contact the paper. And if you recall, in other dispatches, we've had a top official, and this is what Alan Rusbridger was talking about a high official. So now we know this high official was none other than Jared Haywood. Rusbridger is the publisher of the Guardian. The Guardian was a relatively small newspaper in London or in the UK until it went into the WikiLeaks and other businesses. Now the website's populated by many of us, and their sales have went up. Russ and Bridger said in the conversation with the government were very well. We already got ahead of them on this story. Nonetheless, they destroyed some hard drives, evidently in the basement of the Guardian, and the government feared that its secret data held by the newspaper fall into what they call the wrong hands, and could be linked to a threat to the UK. Doubtful very seriously that was how conversations between Whitehall and the Guardian took place with explicit approval of the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg. He's of the Lib Dems, they call themselves, and the Foreign Minister William Hague. And two GCHQ security types oversaw the destruction of the hard drives. That's a little bit of sentiment there. Russ and Bridger said we were quite clear we were not going to hand over this material back to the British government, so we destroyed it ourselves under advice from a couple of GCHQ intelligence experts who told us the bits to which smashing them to bits. So in other words, once smashed to bits, they couldn't use it, obviously. So that ended the tale of the hard drives that the Guardian had, but obviously if they are not fools, they had copies someplace else on the grandmother's bed, or who knows where they would have it. One would never know. The German leader Merkel, while we're with the BBC, visits the Dacha camp, later reef at the former Nazi concentration camp at Dachau. It is the first visit of the site by a German chancellor. She made a short emotional speech saying the camp fills me with deep sadness and shame, and I hope she would. Some 3,000 people died in Dacha before it was liberated, of course, by U.S. soldiers. This particular one, many of those camps there were liberated by soldiers of the Soviet Union. This one, I suppose, the U.S. Not sure what the symbolic treatment of this was, but nonetheless, the Iron Lady was there, standing alone at a camp that obviously is no longer used by anyone. Another interesting article, we try to do a lot of international news. Brazil appeals against hotel prices. I'm not sure what all this is about. The tourist board had asked World Football Governing Board, FIFA, and hotel operators to try to bring down hotel prices, which have reportedly skyrocketed for the World Cup period. World Cups are very big in most of the world, not in the U.S. It'll open next year, the 12th of June, in San Pablo. And so nonetheless, hotel prices have already went up, and they're thinking that it would one day appear there. So the FIFA, the 2006 World Cup held in Germany was attended by more than 3 million fans, a lot of fans. Similar demand in 2014. So thus the hotel prices in Rio and all of Brazil are much more expensive. They finally come to the juncture that they're hosting a World Cup in Brazil. I'd have to check when the last time one appeared there. Look at a little news from the African continent. We already got Mubarak there. Morgan Tsvangirai in Judge's insult probe the court in Zimbabwe decided that the leader there, President Mugabe, won the election fairly and squarely, as we'd say in the U.S. And this justice there was not very happy about what Morgan Tsvangirai had to say about him, disparaging remarks he made about the judiciary. President Mugabe won 61% of the vote against 34% for Tsvangirai, a low turnout there. So they're going back and forth. Of course, President Mugabe is 89 years old, so it's a 6-year term. I don't know if he'll finish it out or not, but probably his last, and the country will have to, no doubt, have a new leader and see where they go from there. ZANU PF party is their party, so we'll see which direction that goes in. Kenya and China signed a $5 billion deal worth $5 billion. China is to build a railroad. China has been involved in various African countries for a very long time. Ethiopia and some others building railroads. Back in the Cold War days, they were engaged there. Of course, the Soviets there, but the Chinese, of course, have been the rail building in North America at one time, or at least they were used to do it. It's the deal was signed, of course, by the Kenyan president, Uhuru Kenyatta. To build the particular railroad there is a massive boost to the government. A rail link is important in the context, of course, East Africa, no doubt about that. President Xi said China was also exploring other areas of investment, including agribusiness, irrigation, fertilizers, production, and purchases and technology. Now, one of the criticisms the Chinese have had put upon them is that, yes, the various developing companies need their technology and need their assistance, no doubt about that. But where the problem comes in, particularly in Africa, is that the Chinese business community comes in and starts selling, say, Chinese clothing products at lower prices than they can be produced locally. So, in other words, an accommodation definitely has to be made to make certain that those things are taken care of, and it's a two-way street. They agreed, another thing, party-to-party contacts were essential to boost political and economic partnerships. That's very good, the party-to-party things, because those are some of the things that they obviously need to be doing. Out of Algeria, now this is the first day for Algeria to have their North American or U.S. edition. A story here by Jason Leopold. The malaria drug overused in Guantanamo Bay. Department of Defense has been urged to restrain all Guantanamo prisons to determine whether a heavy dose of anti-malaria drug administered at the facility between January 2002 and mid-2005 caused brain damage. The drug, metforquine, I think it's called Medforquine, or Quine, was targeted last month with an FDA warning of possible side effects ranging from depression, anxiety, to psychosis, and even suicide. Remington Navan, a former Army major leading researcher into the effects of anti-malaria drugs, said the military should review several prisoner suicides at Guantanamo. It's an interesting take. I've not heard of an anti-malaria drug causing this sort of thing, but no doubt about it. Neurological effects such as dizziness, vertigo, tetanus, loss of balance between have been reported. These adverse reactions may occur early in the course of midquinine use, and in some cases have been reported to continue for months or years after midquinine has been stopped. The psychiatric symptoms range from anxiety, paranoia, depression, hallucinations. Psychotic behavior can occur with metformin. Causes of suicide ideation and suicides have been reported. Suicide ideation. Anyway, while the recommended dose of prophylactic doses for an adult is 250 milligrams, each prisoner transferred to Guantanamo between that period was administered 1.25 milligrams of the powerful drug within 24 hours of being transferred there. Some came from places where malaria was. Freedom of Information Act made no mention of malaria in its travel advisory. Wait a minute. In its travel advisory, you jumped ahead of ourselves here. I'm about to run out of time. For extended stays in Cuba. Now, no doubt there's not any malaria, is not a threat in Guantanamo Bay. They've not had malaria there. So why they're giving malaria drugs, very interesting to find out. Assault on brains, Fluorine, let's see here, we can find what did, well, it causes, is not the first drug administered to Guantanamo patients to come under scrutiny by the FDA. Military documents obtained by Al Jazeera in May confirmed that hunger-striking prisoners who are subject to force feeding may be given a drug to enhance digestion. The drug Regenin has been linked to potentially irreversible and disfiguring disorders characterized by involuntary movement of the face, tongue, and extremities. So in other words, the side effects of many of these drugs, evidently the Guantanamo Bay prisoners are treated as many prisoners in the U.S. In fact, what comes to mind now is the famous syphilis study on African Americans in Alabama, and they found out about it and were later compensated. But this is not the first time that has been done. Recently obtained by Ozil, this is from some military document. Commander inquired into the death of a prisoner who was said to have overdosed on an anti-psychotic medication. States that guards and medical personnel repeatedly violated various protocols. There's no doubt about that. They have a lot of sadistic types there as guards, and a lot of scum. They're masquerading as medical personnel. Now, when I say masquerading, they're actually medical personnel, but they're from the bottom of the barrel. And no doubt they were selected deliberately to, as they say, be introduced into that type of environment, which is not something very unusual at all. Dispatch out of Cairo says journalists on the siege. There's no doubt about that. They're definitely on the siege, and this is in Egypt. The radioactive, if you recall, the nuclear reactors at Hiroshima is leaking again. That's the Tokyo Power Company is still in charge of the Hiroshima nuclear plant. Announced that at least 300 metric tons of highly radioactive water had leaked from a storage tank around the crippled reactor. 300 tons is roughly equivalent to the amount of water used each day by 200 U.S. families, that's according to the Environmental Protection Agency. The worst is the leak is the worst yet, leak from the steel tanks. Now, at that facility has definitely been troubled. damage to container building cooling systems made it necessary to continually pump water over the damaged reactor core since the early crisis. More than 1,000 tanks were built around the plant to store massive amounts of water. So in other words, some of these leaking plant operators found that the Fukushima workers had been exposed to radioactive water from a mist spray used to cool the reactors on hot summer days. So that is in Tokyo. Tokyo, of course, a nation does not have fossil fuels. They import their oil, so they have nuclear reactors there. But also at the same time, they are prone to earthquakes and tsunamis and various other things that happen. Nonetheless, this is Bostonred for the News in 10 on Bostonred on the World. Stay tuned for our future Bostonred programs. We'll have a number coming up as the week moves forward, and we'll have another one of these programs on Wednesday, I believe. It's about 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Good evening.